Assalamualaikum. My name is YASMEEN binti HASNAN S54815. Our group will present about the neoclassical school in chapter 15, 16 and 17. In chapter 15, it is about Alfred Marshall, while chapter 16 about monetary economics, and the last chapter is about the departure from pure competition. First, I want to explain about the background of the school of thought. The period between the passing away of Mill and the advent of Marshall from 17th century to late 19th century was full of implications as far as the development of economic science was concerned. There were many factors which gave rise to neoclassical school of thought, such as changes in economic structure, technological aspects, form of competition, and working conditions for worker classes, and so on. Attentions of economic theories converge to analysis of economic behavior, focusing on its decision-making units such as household, firms, and government, as opposed to aggregate one. From the point of view of neoclassical economists, the problem the sovereign study was the functions of the market system and its role as alligators.
Hi, I'm AKMAL bin ISMAIL. I will present about main principle of the neoclassical schools. The first one is methodological individualism. They agree that there is no such things as a society. Just individuals and families can be seen as a classic statement of the politics. The next one is rationality. Neoclassical theory assumes that all individual agents' behavior is rational. The next one is equilibrium. Neoclassical simplify the complexities by introducing modules and set of assumptions. The next one is the importance of the price mechanism. They assume that the main interaction between economics agents take place through the price system. The next one is competition. The neoclassical economy is that the power of individual economic actors in influencing the system is quite nil. The next one is agents' knowledge. Assumption in neoclassical assume that all economic have a perfect knowledge of anything in the past, present, or future, which might influence their decision. The next one is the use of formal modeling. Neoclassical economists use a highly developed set of formal models. The last one is building up competitive general equilibrium theory. They develop a general equilibrium model of theory for the economy. Alfred Marshall, born July 26, 1842, London, England, and died July 13, 1924 at Cambridge. The second son of William Marshall, Marshall was educated at merchant tailor schools, one of the chief founders of the School of English Neoclassical Economics. He published Economics of Industry with his wife, Mary Paley. In 50 years of writing, he produced 82 publications. In Utility of and Demand, Alfred Marshall said that marginal utility, which is too short an interval to consider any change in character and taste of a particular person. The next one is rational consumer choice. His demand analysis employed the idea of rational consumer choice. The next one is law of demand. Marshall's law of demand follows directly from his notions of diminishing marginal utility and rational consumer choice. The next one is consumer surplus. Marshall asserted that the total utility of a good is the sum of the successive marginal utilities of each added unit. And the last one, under utility and demand, is elasticity of demand. Marshall was far superior to his predecessors in handling elasticity of demand. Under supplies, Marshall said about a immediate present. Market price refer to the present with no time allowed for adaptation of the quantity supply to change in demand. In the short run, the next one is the short run. Marshall referred to as a short run. He divide costs into two types, which he called supplementary costs and prime costs. And the third one is long run. In the long run, all costs are variable and they must all be covered if the firm is to continue in business. Equilibrium price and quantity are from Marshall. What determines market price? Marshall the Great scientist said both supply and demand is numerical representation and graphical representation. Distribution of income, said Marshall, most constantly compare the relative efficiency of every agent of production they employ, which said Marshall, are not determined by the marginal productivity of labor alone, and marginal productivity is the basis of the demand for labor, which is defined demand depending on the demand by consumer for final product. And interest raise in the rate of interest diminish the use of mechanized because the business present avoid the use all the machines who net annual supplies in less than the rate interest. Finally, profit ranks, question ranks. According to Marshall, normal profit include interest and the earning on management and the supply price of business organization. Next, increasing and decreasing cost industry, Alfred Marshall. First, the life cycle of business enterprise. Marshall took a dynamic view of the growth of business enterprise. Second, internal versus external economy. For the external economics, said Marshall, are the efficiency of cost saving introduced by the growth in size of the individual firm. Next, increasing and decreasing return to scale. Marshall talked that we generally have increased return to scale in industry at labor and capital expend organization and efficient improve. Finally, where effect of tax and subsidy. Marshall applied this same type of analysis to decrease cost industry. His analysis showed that a tax would raise tax revenue by more than it would reduce consumer surplus.
The classical of Marxist school felt that money and process are subordinate to more basic economic factors. Wicksell and Keynes combined monetary analysis with their study of fundamental economic processes. The Marshall-Cambridge equation is M equals to KPT. M stands for stock of money, K for fraction of income, P for general price level, and T for volume of trade or real income. Wicksell, Fisher, and Hawtrey made a twofold contribution to economics. First, explore an area that had been neglected, and second is help integrate monetary analysis into general economic emphasis. John Gustav Knut Wicksell was leading Swedish economist and born in Stockholm, Sweden. His economic contributions was influenced both the Keynesian and Austrian schools' economic thought. He undergraduated at the University of Uppsala, and Wicksell's interest in social problems and reform led him to a study of economics. Price level changes. The normal or natural rate of interest depends on supply and demand for real capital that is not yet invested. In price level changes, if bank rate was smaller than natural rate, it means saving will discourage and the demand of consumption, goods and services will rise. If bank rate was larger than natural rate, natural rate, it means saving will increase and investment spending will decline. For implication public policy, the principal cause of cyclical fluctuation is the fact that technological and commercial progress, especially of an expanding population, enforced saving with cell hypothesized a case in which a new enterprise was financed through a bank loan, pure credit creation without a corresponding accumulation of real capital. With cell and imperfect competition, retailers usually have a fixed circle of customers, and this enables them to have fixed rather than fluctuating prices. Next is about Irving Fisher. Irving Fisher was an American economic statistician, inventor, eugenicist, and progressive social campaigner. Some concepts named after him include the Fisher equation, the Fisher hypothesis, the international Fisher effect, the Fisher separation theorems, and Fisher markets. Fisher's main contributions were in the fields of money, interest, and capital. Fisher's also writings include the nature of capital and income, 1906, and the rate of interest, 1907, and so on.
Assalamualaikum. My name is NURUL AMIRAH binti SULAIMAN. I will present about the theory of Irving Fisher and Ralph George Hawtrey. The first theory is Fisher's theory of interest. There are two factors that can establish the interest rate. The first factor is inflation rate, the extent of the community's willingness to obtain present consumption by giving up future consumption. The amount of future consumption it is willing to trade off for present consumption depends on how impatient it is. The less impatient, the more it is willing to save and invest, thereby gaining future consumption. The second factor is investment opportunity rate, determined by real factors such as the quantity and quality of resource and the state of technology. At one extreme, it will be feasible to devote this resource to producing goods for present consumption alone. At the other extreme, society could use all of them to produce capital such that present consumption was zero but future consumption would be large. However, as society moves from the first extreme to the latter one, it experiences diminishing marginal returns. The second theory is the quantity theory of money. Fisher presents all quantity theory of money. The quantity theory asserts that if we increase the number of dollars by debasing coins, price will be increased in the same proportion. In order to explain the direct and proportionate change between quantity of money and price level, Fisher gave equation of exchange. The original equation of exchange is stated as PT equal to MV or P equal to MV per T, in which P stands for the price level, M quantity of money, T for transactions, and V stands for velocity of money. But he later criticized the original version of his theory for not including credit money. According to him, there are five determinants of the purchasing power of money. First, the volume of currency in circulation. Second, its velocity of circulation. Third, the volume of bank deposits subject to check. Fourth, its velocity. And fifth, the volume of trade. Next, the theory of Ralph George Hawtrey. First theory is monetary theory of the business cycle. The wholesale merchant or trader is the key figure in Hawtrey's scheme, and the key factor is the rate of interest. The producer borrow money to hold inventories, and because their markup is quite small, interest charge are an important component of their cost. The second theory is discretionary monetary policy. The central bank can regulate credit and thereby promote stability. Sometimes it merely has to modify a tendency to expansion or contraction. At other times, it must reverse the tendency. Because the existing tendency possesses a certain momentum, significant force is required to reverse it.
Next, the departure from poor competition. In this topic, is it more focused on the interest in imperfect competition that arises because of the gap in economic theory between the model of competition and poor monopoly. So, and it will explain the theory of monopoly competition in more detail as to its level. These new ideas were mostly developed by Edward Hastings Chamberlain. But before addressing his theories, it will be useful to discuss briefly the early microeconomic ideas of Piero Scarpa. So, Piero Scarpa is a leading member of the post-Keynesian and was a critic of neoclassical. His early work was within the traditional of neoclassical, and he produced important work in criticizing the theory of competition. Moreover, his article also focused on pointed out how, as a firm become increasingly efficient, its size increase, there will be fewer firms and less competition, and this can lead to a natural monopoly. And then the next one is about Edward Hastings Chamberlain. He published the theory of monopolistic competition in 1993, and it explained a range of market situations that are neither purely competitive nor total monopolistic. Chamberlain also held market price are actually determined by both monopolistic and competitive element. So the last one is Joanne Robinson. Her book was The Economy of Imperfect, and Robinson developed monopolistic competition theory, and she also added two generalization idea of monopsony, where the under for competition price is equal to marginal utility, and under monopsony marginal cost is equal to marginal utility. And she also presented the contemporary graphical representation of labor market and monopsony.
Next, the founder of neoclassical theory. Neoclassical economics is a broad approach that attempts to explain the production, pricing, consumption of goods and service, and income distribution through supply and demand. The method is clearly scientific, with assumptions, hypotheses, and attempts to derive general rules of principle about the behavior of firms and consumers. Neoclassical economics includes the work of Stanley Jevons, Leon Walras, Karl Menger, Wilfredo Pareto, and Maria Edgeworth.
Next, there is a criticism against the school of thought. So one of the most common criticism of neoclassical school is the unrealistic assumption. Okay, this is because the assumption of rational behavior ignore the vulnerability and irrationality in human nature. So actually, the behavior economic focus on studying irrational behavior in economic decision making. The study provide empirical evidence of human behavior in an economy. It also argue whether utility or profit maximization is the only goal of an individual or company. And then the next one is neoclassical school is criticized for its over dependence on its mathematical approach. So empirical science is missing in the study. The study is overly based on the theoretical model. It's not adequate to explain the actual economy, especially on the interdependence of an individual with the system. So it can also lead to normative bias. And then the last one is neoclassical school is also considered overly dependent on complex and unrealistic mathematical models. So the complex models are not applicable to describe the real economy. In response to the criticism, American educator and economist Milton Friedman claimed that a theory should be judged by its ability to predict, and the complexity of the model of realism of the assumption is not a standard to judge a theory.
Is there any theory from the school valid until today? First, Marshall theory of capital was designed to serve two main purposes: an integration of the theory of income distribution into a general theory of value, and the closing of the gap between economy theory and business practice. Second, the monetary theory of the neoclassical school tries in fact to show that if we compare a battery economy and a monetary economy, a valid resource and individual preference being the same quantities, product and relative price are the same. Finally, the analysis of competition in the Nicholas theory is contained
in the model of perfect competition, which describe the ideal condition that must hold in the market so as to ensure the existing perfectly competitive behavior from the typical firm, and by extension the characterization of the industry as competitive or not. Thank you.